We will, of course, get to Iran, which is very much on everybody's mind, but we'd like to start first by acknowledging that today is the 6-month anniversary of October 7. So it seems appropriate to start by taking stock of where we are today. Let me thank Ari again for his great generosity in meeting with us like this and ask him, 6 months in, where are we with respect to Gaza, with respect to the hostages, and with respect to the North? Where has the mission been accomplished and where not? So, Ari, over to you.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you, Joel and Nicole, my amazing friends, and thank you all for joining us. I really think that beyond the interest, I think it's really important to have these kinds of conversations at this critical moment, and sadly, it's still a critical moment, and in some ways even more than in the past. We'll discuss that. So I'm really thankful, and I hope we'll have a vivid, friendly discussion. I'll answer Nicole's questions. I'll give some opening remarks, but I'm very much into the dialogue. I'm eager to hear your questions and to have a real dialogue here. It is 6 months. Difficult to believe. Timna and I went down to our shelter, which is 3 yards down the basement from here. When our lives changed, I think the lives of everyone on this call has changed. Israel will never be the same again. The Jewish people will never be the same again. What has happened is still incomprehensible, even 6 months later. I think that the essence of the trauma, I will not get into it now, but was the fact that we were faced with sheer evil. We were faced with a demonic phenomena in the 21st century, and we were shocked to discover Israeli incompetence in dealing with evil and this kind of barbarism and brutality. So that was the deepest. I'm sorry for the dog barking, but we'll take care of that soon. That was the experience that I think is still with all of us. But 6 months later, and again, we can get afterwards into the process of what happened over these 6 months. I must say that in some ways, I'm more concerned than ever. The first days and weeks were terrifying. There was almost apocalyptic fear, but there was also resilience, there was strength, there was a heroic Israeli response of the Israeli society and Israeli individuals. When I look around now, again, I'm talking about Israel, and I want to hear about how you see things in America. But when I look around in Israel, on the one hand, life is almost back to normal. There is semi-normalcy, the hustle of life. The restaurants are full, traffic jams. There is life, which was absent for a few months last year. But on the other hand, there is something deep, heavy, there's almost depression in the air. And there are some good reasons for that. My main concern is that there is an amazing gap. It seems that the world has forgot October 7th, while Israelis are stuck in October 7th. We see everything through that day. In some ways, we did not recover and move forward. We are all there. We are wounded, we are in pain, we are traumatized. It has impact on our ability to be rational, and we are totally in that trauma. At the very same time, the international community has moved forward, and many people who are not Jewish or not especially pro-Israelis almost forgot about October 7th. They see what's happening now in Gaza, and they don't see what where it came from. I said it when I was in New York 2 weeks ago, and I used the metaphor, and excuse me for repeating it, I think it's important, that the tragedy of the Israeli existence is that in some ways, we have to be a beast in the Middle East, and we have to be a beauty in the Upper East. If we not project power here, if we seem to be weak, we cannot survive for one day. But on the other hand, for our own soul and for our international positioning, which we will talk about, we must be moral, we must capture the moral high ground. Sadly, 6 months after the war, in the Middle East, we are perceived as weak, while in the Upper East, we're perceived as a beast. That's the exact opposite of what should have been the case. In one of our previous conversations, I said that what concerns me so much is that Sinwar is an evil genius. What part of it is Iran and what part of it is Hamas is to be discussed. But the basic strategy of Sinwar is to be the Viet Cong, is a General Dieppe strategy. He's not only willing, but he wants to sacrifice the people of Gaza, the civilian population of Gaza, so he can turn the American population against Israel. And this is exactly what he has been doing. He created a kind of lose-lose situation for Israel, where if we don't use power, we are defeated. But if we use power in the way we've used it, we are in danger of becoming a pariah state. And 6 months later, Israel has not found a strategic solution to that evil genius strategy. So the problem is that we don't have strategy here. Our legitimacy is being eroded. And at the same time, and we'll get into that later, we've not managed to translate the amazing energy of the Israeli people, of Israeli society, into political reform within Israel. So what scares me, or the two dangers that I see, they're writing on the wall. One is South Africa, and the other is South Vietnam. South Africa is obvious. They are trying to turn out. We are not. Let me be clear. I'm a passionate Zionist. I think that Israel is one of the most just human projects in the universe, and I'm willing to defend that. But they are trying to put us in that corner, and we are not fighting back properly on that essential front. They are, in a sense, when I was a boy in New York, the main term at the time was the Nixon strategy of the Vietnamization of the war. I fear the Vietnamization of Israel. This is the other great threat, where Israel will be perceived as weak and dependent on America. And this is what we have to change, and we'll talk about it dramatically. These are the new danger right now. It's not that Hamas is gone and Iran is there. We'll talk about it in a second. But there was a total failure in addressing the political, diplomatic, humanitarian dimension of this war. We fought it with tactics, sometimes in a brilliant way, but we didn't develop a counter strategy to the evil genius of the strategy of Sinwar. To say something before we end this opening about the positive, first of all, there was the spirit of the Israeli people is still amazing. It didn't go away. What you see here at every street corner, at every social gathering, I'll share with you for just 1 minute that Timna and I are now members of the club that we feel is the most prestigious club we ever were invited to join. And it's the Kfar Aza Whiskey Club. There was a whiskey club in Kfar Aza. There was one guy there who became a kind of single malt connoisseur. with the little money they had, they would travel to Scotland to breweries and get whiskey. And they would meet on the terrace of his small apartment in the kibbutz every 2 or 3 months. We were honored enough to visit the first gathering of the Kfar Aza Whiskey Club after what they call the incident. Facing me was a man who lost his son, his 25-year-old son. Next to him was a guy who lost his wife. Next to me was a guy who was seriously wounded in the first hours of the war. We never walked into a room where there was so much pain and so much tragedy. And if I may say so, there was so much Jewish and Israeli justice. But the amazing thing about these people is that they are not into being defeated. They would not go, I asked them about the past, but they were into building their lives, enjoying their whiskey, and moving forward. So I still believe that with all the difficulties I described, and many more that I'll describe in the next hour or so, this amazing Israeli spirit of the Kfar Aza Whiskey Club is the one that makes me optimistic.
Thank you for that. We'll come back to Gaza because I do want to talk about, just very briefly at some point, the status on the ground militarily and with the hostages. I think, unfortunately, what you've done is remind us all that politically and diplomatically, this has been pretty much a disastrous 6 months, which we've got to find our way out of. But let's turn briefly to Iran, which is, I think, on everybody's mind this morning. As I think most people know, this past week, Israeli warplanes struck a building next to the Iranian embassy in Damascus, killing a very senior Revolutionary Guard general and several other military leaders. Israel is now, I think, actively bracing for an expected retaliatory attack, whether on the ground in Israel or someplace overseas. Of course, they don't know. Ari, why did Israel strike now, given this political and diplomatically fragile moment? What was the rationale? What are the implications? Was it widely approved by the war cabinet? And talk to us about what happened, why it happened, and how you see it playing out.
So if, again, me being me, excuse me, let me try to look at the larger picture, because I think this is so important. And there is the major drama is lost in the coverage of the Gaza war. This is not an Israel-Hamas war. This is an Iranian-Israeli war, and in some ways, it's the Iranian war against the West. And we were so blind. We did talk for years about the Iranian nuclear project, not in a smart enough way, but we really missed the plot. And the plot is that Iran has a very determined, systematic, strategic plan to destroy Israel by 2040. But the guiding principle of their strategy is not to have direct war with Israel, but to weaken Israel gradually. They wanted Israel to lose its legitimacy, to lose its technological advantage, superiority, and they want Israel to lose its elites. They want to drive out of Israel the 300, 400, 500 leading people who make the economy boom and the technology so successful. That's the plan. If you remember the old metaphor of the frog in the water, in the pot of, they are trying to make us a frog. They're heating the water around us gradually, hoping that if we don't jump at the right time, eventually we will not have the capability to jump out of it. What was the brilliant, and what is the brilliant Iranian strategy? It has 3 tiers. One, the nuclear, which we heard about. By acquiring nuclear weapons, they want to neutralize the hegemony of Dimona. As an Israeli, I'm limited in what I can say about Dimona, but if what is said about Dimona is true, that's actually Israel's most impressive project, because on the one hand, we acquired unique capability, and on the other hand, we were so responsible in using it. We never used it in an irresponsible manner. And if there was relative stability in the Middle East and no conventional wars for 50 years, it's because of Dimona. I mean, Dimona is a major factor. So one element, they want to neutralize the hegemony, and not because they want to throw a bomb on Tel Aviv, but they understand that the moment the Dimona hegemony will be, or monopoly, will be gone, they will be able to do much more conventional warfare. That's the idea. But the second tier of their strategy, we totally missed. They're into neutralizing Israel's conventional technological superiority. And what they've done in 20 years is an amazing building of conventional capability. And again, bear with me, those of you who have heard me in New York, but I said it, the most important day in the history of the modern Middle East is September 14th, 2019, when they attacked the Saudi oil facilities in Saudi Arabia. What you saw that day is Iranian capability, Iranian audacity, and Western impotence. The president was President Trump. He didn't do anything. So that the second element of their strategy is this kind of conventional using, President Obama, and perhaps I'll talk about him later, was so successful in the war against terror with relatively low costs because drones were on our side, on the side of the West. Now drones are on their side. We've seen it in Kiev, and Kiev is, believe me, it's just Act 1. This is what the next decades are going to be about. So that's the second tier of the Iranian strategy. The third one was building these 5 terror bases around Israel, encircling Israel with terror bases that will be able to destabilize Israel. Their aim right now is Jordan. That's the next base they want. If they get Jordan, if they destabilize Jordan, first of all, they'll have a continuity from Yemen and so on, and Israel will be in a very difficult spot. So the Hamas war is, again, as horrible as it is, it's almost a sideshow. It's a part of the Iranian issue is the major issue, and Israel failed totally in telling that story. Now let's get to the decision. The logic behind the attack, again, assuming it was Israel, we as Israelis are limited in saying it, there is logic. The logic is that the Iranians, the trauma of the Iranians is the Iraq-Iran war. When they were hit by rockets, by Iraqi rockets, the Iranians don't like to get killed. You'll be surprised to know. They are willing to fight to the last Lebanese, the last Sudanese, the last Yemenite, the last Palestinian, the last anyone. They don't like their boys to be killed, and they're afraid of it. So what Israel said, guys, you're fighting us all the time with all these proxies. You build this, there's this Iranian octopus all around us. Sorry, we will hit back at the head of the octopus. We're not willing to play that game. There is logic in that response. The second element of the Israeli reasoning is bring back Israeli deterrence. Israel, after being so hurt and with this terrible apocalypse of October 7th, by proving that you have a capability, with our air capability, intelligence capability, you bring deterrence back. It's important for not only for Israel, for the stability of the Middle East. So that's the logic. Where are the risks, and why am I ambivalent? Again, I don't have enough information to judge. The problem is that it contradicts the Israeli, if we had something of a strategy, which is to limit it to Gaza right now and deal with other issues later on. With Israel's zero legitimacy at the moment, and with internal problems, and the army not yet going through real transformation, we have an interest in actually limiting this stage of the war and getting ready for whatever happens in the next decade. escalating it in such a way is a great, great risk. So I think that, the jury's out, and we'll know. First of all, I am afraid that there will be. I think that the Iranians who don't want to fight us directly, they prefer proxies. They feel humiliated. We'll talk about it later. There's Israeli politics. I hear there's even American politics, if I'm not mistaken. And now we even have Iranian politics because they feel humiliated. And even if it's not consistent with their grand strategy, they will feel obliged to attack directly. Let us pray and hope that it'll be a limited attack so it doesn't cause a major escalation, which right now no one wants.
So it's interesting, though, because a lot of the countries in the Middle East that are the Abraham Accords countries and others must all be holding their breath now, because they are clearly on the side of Israel as against Iran, but would not want to have to take sides given their own domestic challenges. Do you have any sense of their reaction to this at all?
Knew Henry Kissinger. In his memoir, he said that of all the places in the world that he traveled through, the politics of the Middle East is the most sophisticated, which was a very polite way of saying that in this region, we feel A, think B, say C, do D. Okay, there is no correlation whatsoever between what is said by regional figures on CNN and what they think and what they want. Right. Our Arab neighbors, thank God, most of our Arab neighbors are terrified of Iran. They have only two things on their mind: Iran and jihad forces, Sunni jihad. I mean, basically radical Shiite Islam and radical Sunni Islam. They move forward, thank God, and they actually see us as their most reliable neighbor. So under all the talk, the Arab-Israeli strategic alliance still holds. By the way, it held in an amazing way in the last 6 months. I don't know if you remember the statement of, I think, the Prince Crown, a leading Bahrain figure, who said that Israel has a right of self-defense, something that I believe you can say on very few American campuses these days. So the region is in this sense realistic. No, we know in what mud we are stuck. What the world doesn't understand. This is a muddy, muddy region. Thank God in this region there is Israel, and thank God there are the Gulf countries and there is Arab modernity now. So all the moderates and the same people in the region are praying for Israel's success, But they cannot have Israel they cannot have a weak Israel, and they cannot have a brutal Israel. They want Israel to succeed in a dignified way. So do I, by the way. So the key for success is for Israel to project power in a reasonable and right way, and not to lose this essential alliance with the Arabs. And when we'll talk about hopeful solutions for Gaza, the key, I think many of you have heard me saying, the key, there must be a Palestinian component, but the key for solution is Arab. The moderate Arabs, the pragmatic Arabs, the ones who are into modernity, into solution solving and not into the past, are the key figures. And my personal hero is MBZ. I'm a great MBZ fan, and that's what we have to think about. And it's like an American Arab-Israeli alliance at the end of the day is the one thing that can save us from losing the war, and it's the one thing that can bring us closer to some sort of peace in the future.
So that's you mentioned Gaza a couple of times, and I want to go back to that, because even if this isn't all about Gaza, obviously Gaza is in the headlines and I want to put Biden aside for a moment, but is obviously having a huge impact on U.S.-Israel relations. But talk for a moment about the humanitarian issues in Gaza. There's relentless world attention. It's hurting Israel globally, politically, diplomatically. Should Israel be doing more or differently with respect to humanitarian aid? Should there be a ceasefire? Or is Israel being held to a standard that no other country would be held to if it was defending itself in a war?
Well, if I may say, Nicole, there are three different questions here at least. So let me try to deal, one at a time. First of all, let me say something. Let me say something individually. Throughout my life, and those of you who have read my book, My Promised Land, and I wrote it in others, for me, there was never a contradiction between the fact that I'm a passionate Zionist and Israeli and the fact that I had deep compassion and empathy for the suffering in Gaza, for 50 years. And I was there as a reserve soldier 35 years ago. It was one of the most traumatic experiences. So I think we should all, there's no contradiction between believing in Israel, thinking Israel is right and wanting to defend Israel, and wanting a much better life for the people of Gaza, because they are, if you wish, Gaza is the symptom carrier of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. In a very small piece of land, you have all the ramifications of the tragedy of the conflict. So that's on the one hand. On the other hand, I do think that, and this is before I'll talk about the toughness of what I think should be done, I think we have to remember that Israel is treated unfairly. I have a lot of criticism of my government and things we've done in the past, things we are doing now. But I want to remind you, or I said again in one of our previous conversations, I think that Israel should be judged according to the Obama standard. Not more and not less. During the Obama years, 25,000 civilians were killed in the war against terror. They were not involved, 25,000. I want you to specific, perhaps if you don't remember, is that on December 2013, a wedding convoy was attacked in Yemen and 12 people were killed. I want to remind you that on October 2015, in Afghanistan, a hospital was bombed. 42 people were killed. 14 of them. Now we have 14 people. It's so similar, so similar. In Khaleb, in Syria, in April 2016, another hospital was bombed. So where was these stories in the New York Times coverage, and where is this story now? This in no way justifies Israel's doing. And I'm critical, and I'll say in a sentence why I'm critical. But let's have perspective here. Let's have perspective. You cannot single out Israel in a way that is almost preposterous. And I'm not talking about Dresden, and I'm not talking about these historical events. I'm talking about recent history, and I'm talking about the most liberal Democrat American president and how he waged war against terror. And by the way, obviously Obama, I don't think he's guilty, but that's what happened when America fought terror. Now let me be critical of my country. What Israelis should have understand that we are not America. The world is a hypocritical world. Superpowers like America and China, and even not superpowers like Russia, can get away with things that a small nation cannot get away with. Definitely not a Jewish nation. And in the past, we understood that. We were not into sentimentality. We understood that these are the rules of the game. Sadly, we lost part of that, wisdom. And therefore, in my mind, we should have dealt with the humanitarian issue, before I'll get into the incident in a minute, we should be the initiative. Does America have to parachute food to Gaza? We should supply food. I don't want some American chocolate bars or protein bars parachuted there. I want Israeli food sent there. on the one hand, we should fight Hamas in a very assertive manner. And on the other hand, we have to make clear that we have no war with children and women and civilian population. So we should, part of the lack of strategy on the Israeli side, and it doesn't come from viciousness or an evil approach. It comes from the trauma, from all kinds. You can ask me about it. I'll try to explain where it comes. It doesn't come from evil, but it's a major mistake. So we should have dealt with it to begin with. We should have been the initiators, and I still think that this is what we should do today. We should be much more generous on the humanitarian issue in an overwhelming way. We should take dramatic steps that totally change, but for two different reasons. First of all, for our own morality. Two, for our international legitimacy, and I will even add for our future relationship with the Palestinians. The Palestinians will not go away. And I want the Palestinian child in Gaza who's suffering in Gaza to know that while Israel was shooting Hamas people, Israel was actually giving him medical and aid and food. The specific incident, which is so tragic, is in every way possible. Is a reflection of this lack of, I would say, discipline and systematic thinking in the Israeli military. They of course, they didn't want it, but it happened because the orders were not strict enough. They were not cautious enough. And I think it's a kind of manifestation of the mistaken approach of the Israeli establishment, all of it, the political and some of the military. Although I can assure you, I know Israel's generals. They are like good people. They are good people. But they are caught in an impossible situation. And now there is no other way but to deal with it. Again, I thought we should do it 5 months ago. We definitely have to do something very dramatic now. Did I answer? So what didn't I answer?
No, that was great. But I guess the last part of it would be, just as a sort of an update, what is the status of the decision on whether to go into Rafah, whether the hostages are still front and center, whether the ceasefire is likely now to happen because of the pressure? We'll get to Biden in a moment. But really on the ground there, what is happening militarily and with respect to the hostages?
The best thing that could have happened within the messy, tragic situation is a hostage deal with a temporary ceasefire, 45 days, 60 days. First of all, bringing the hostages home, stopping or limiting the suffering in Gaza, and actually charging Israel's legitimacy and enabling us, hopefully, to reach some sort of solution. Like the best solution you can have in mind is like what we did with Yasser Arafat in 1982, which were the leadership of the PLO left Beirut. If the leadership of Hamas is forced to leave, that would be the best solution. But even if war is to be resumed afterward, we want the hostages, we have to deal with the humanitarian crisis, and we need legitimacy, which we don't have right now. Going into Rafah right now, even if it's militarily, essentially, is suicidal. That does not mean that we don't have to do it down the line. So there are all kinds of creative solutions around it that I don't want to discuss right now. There are a few creative military minds in this country that do have some sort of ideas. I cannot get into it. I think there is a lot of rhetoric around Rafah. I mean, there is a lot of politics. I may be proven wrong. I don't think there is a chance Israel will go into Rafah in the coming weeks. We actually just pulled out of Khan Yunis today, which was a good thing. And I don't think Rafah is so complicated, so dangerous, that if we'll have to do it, we have to do it after we restart, after some sort of restart. We cannot do it just another act right now because of all of the dimensions that I mentioned. Regarding the hostages, sadly, I think that we're discussing the American-Israeli issue. We all made terrible mistakes here because the moment America, the old saying again during the conflicts and during the Obama era, that you don't want to see daylight between America and Israel. Now you see an entire solar system between Israel and America, okay? And that's bad for everybody. That's bad for everybody. So the chances, I thought throughout that the key to release the hostages is pressure on Qatar. That's the key, not military pressure, pressure on Qatar. And America has to lead it. And the moment it seems Israel and America are in a quarrel, and with Israel losing its legitimacy, with hundreds of thousands of people marching in London today, Hamas are so happy. Why should they give up hostages? So we played the game was really played in a very bad way, and this is another reason to look for a kind of restart.
Well, so let's now then turn to the U.S. Because obviously this is all a backdrop to what went on this week and the rift between the U.S. and Israel. What is your take on the Biden and Blinken warnings to Israel this week? And how, if at all, will they affect Israel's, or have they already affected Israel's policies and actions? And also, what is the view domestically of it? How is it being perceived in Israel? Is it viewed as a betrayal, or is it viewed as something that was inevitable?
So, lehavdil, as we say, to make a difference, like what I did with Iran, I wanted to do with Iran. Let's look at the larger picture, because it's not only America, Israel. It's the attack on Israel's legitimacy, which is so dramatic. So, again, being a passionate liberal Zionist, the wisdom they were trying to turn us into South Africa or Rhodesia 100 years ago, 120 years ago, okay? And therefore, the Zionist solution was always to marry Jewish nationalism to universal ideas. The left went socialist. This is what we had, labor Zionism. And the right, the Jabotinsky right, married it to liberalism, political liberalism. So we always made sure that we will be on the right side of history, that we will not become Ian Smith of Rhodesia and not P.W. Botha and not Ian Paisley of North Ireland. That was the inherent wisdom of the Zionism I grew up. Specifically, when it came to wars, we always understood that because we are a small people, not a superpower, and because we are a Jewish people and a nation, and not many, and there are some people who don't like Jews so much, we always have to capture the moral high ground. Before we go into war, we have to capture the moral high ground. I can give you 10 examples. I'll give you just 3. In 1947, we accepted an impossible partition plan that they gave us only half of the land, but we accepted it. And then during the war, Israel expanded. The Arabs rejected it and lost. We accepted it and won. By being peaceniks, we were much more capable to deal with the war, to win the war. In 1967, the very same, you mentioned Abba Eban. Levi Eshkol sends Abba Eban throughout to Washington, to LBJ, to Downing Street, Harold Wilson, to France, to convince international communities to solve the problem with Egypt. When they don't do that, America gives Israel the green light for the Six-Day War, which we win. In 2000, Ehud Barak goes to Bill Clinton's peace summit in Camp David. It doesn't achieve peace, but the willingness of Israel to accept the two-state solution, to divide Jerusalem, all these things, gives us the international credit that allows Ariel Sharon to defeat the Second Intifada. When this war broke out, we did nothing. We did nothing to translate the trauma and the justice. We were the ultimate victims in October 7th. We should have used that moment in order to create the political concept, the international concept that gave us the moral high ground. We didn't do that. So what happened basically that we had 3 good months with an amazing Biden administration at the time, but it was clear that they'll give us until New Year's. And since the beginning of 2024, it's been going downhill. Now, here, after criticizing my own government, I have reservations regarding the conduct of the American. And again, I let me be very clear. As an Israeli, personally, as Ari Shavit, I admire America sometimes more than many of my American friends. As an Israeli, I'm grateful to America, and I come with that. I don't come with criticism and not with the condescending approach. But I think that sadly, while Israel didn't give a political concept that will enable us to win the war, in the last few months, the reaction of the administration was ideas that are unrealistic. In principle, I love the two-state solution. But we've tried it in 1993, we tried it in 2000, we tried it in 2007, we tried it in 2014, it failed. So do you expect Israelis, after the women were raped in Kfar Aza and the men were beheaded in Be'eri, you expect them to accept an idea that is suicidal to them? This is what you bring to the table? Now, was it so difficult to develop a new idea? And again, I blame my government because it's our responsibility. Netanyahu should have gone. Look, Netanyahu's life dream was to be Churchill, okay? He gets an opportunity to be Churchill. It's a Churchillian moment. What's the main thing Churchill did? He went to Washington to capture the heart of FDR and the American political elite. And they signed the Atlantic Charter in August 1941, where basically Churchill gave up the empire in order to get American support. This is the Churchillian thing Netanyahu should have done. He should have struck a kind of new Atlantic Charter, call it the Democratic Charter, with Biden. Now, both sides are, the Israeli government, not Netanyahu's government, is ignoring the difficulties of the Biden administration faces. And the ideas that come from Washington are not realistic ideas. They are not realistic ideas. So I pray that in some sort of way, we will get these two gentlemen to sit together and will bring some sort of real, and again, generally speaking, I think the key should be basing it on what I referred to before, on the great achievement of the Abraham Accords. Work with MBZ, work with the Saudis, have American leadership creating an American Arab-Israeli alliance with international dimensions, a Marshall Plan for Gaza that will bring moderate Palestinians, but will not try to bring about the old Palestinian state. Eventually, I think there will be a Palestinian state, but right now, that's not the solution for tomorrow.
So, Ari, we've talked before about the Arab countries basically having to say one thing on CNN for their own domestic stability purposes, but actually having somewhat different views about their friends and allies in the region. Obviously, on the issue you're talking about, Biden has huge political problems that he's dealing with in dealing with Israel, and Bibi in his own way has that. Within the limits of what you can tell us, should we have any confidence that more pragmatic, realistic, aware people are having conversations behind the scenes that make more sense and that there is some hope here? Because based on what you just said and the conversation we've had, there doesn't seem any path. But I have to believe that there must be people who understand what you're talking about and are, at least apart from the political posturing almost, having the right kinds of conversations.
So first of all, I totally agree with your analysis. Basically, what happened here is that Israeli politics didn't allow Netanyahu to do the right thing. I think he should have done it, but he felt he cannot do the right thing. Now, American politics, Michigan politics, don't allow, limit Biden, and we are stuck. And I'll take a step further. Look, the American-Israeli alliance is crucial for Israel. I think it's very important for America as well, and I can explain. There is no symmetry here, but I think, and the American-Israeli alliance, which is an amazing achievement. By the way, the credit goes to Levi Eshkol and Lyndon Johnson in 1964, and then to Golda Meir and Nixon and Henry Kissinger and Yitzhak Rabin in 1969. It's an amazing story. And the mistakes done by my government in the last decade regarding this are preposterous. But now this crucial alliance is attacked by the Israeli right and the American left, and we should not let them destroy it. We should not let them destroy it. So I think although I'm worried, as you've heard, I have optimism in me. I think in this way or another, reason will prevail. And we'll talk about Israeli politics later. I think either from the Israeli side, Netanyahu wakes up and begins to do the right thing, even with measured steps, quickly, or he will be replaced. I mean, there is a limit. Look, I'll say something disturbing as a Jew. We destroyed the first temple and we destroyed the second temple with this kind of messianic, fanatical, zealot's approach, which ignores reality. And the genius of the Zionist movement and Israel until the last decade was that we learned the lesson. And we said, we will not ignore reality. What's happening now is that there is an element of excuse my French, but an element of insanity. It's like insane. It's not a question of right and left. It's really not a question of right and left, because definitely for that. But even if you are a right-wing Israeli, play the game. When Netanyahu gave the Bar Ilan speech, why did he become a peacenik? He understood where the world is, where the American president is, and he maneuvered, he danced, whatever you want to call it. Now Israel is not giving, and no, it's not Israel. It's the Israeli government is not giving any substance for a relief process, for bringing remedy to this acute problem. So I think that it has to get better. I'm just not willing to accept that something so irrational. It's pure. It's just irrational. What's happening now is irrational, and I cannot believe it will go on.
So let me talk a little bit about the domestic situation, because obviously Bibi not remaining has a lot to do with what people are actually thinking there. On each of the issues we've talked about, hostages, ceasefire, continued military activity in Gaza, Bibi's and the war cabinet's means of prosecuting the war in Gaza, and also Hezbollah, the Iran action, the US, on each one. Can we just go through them really quickly? Will you tell us what the Israeli people, where they are divided and where they are united? Because that's something that's very hard for us, I think, to get a grasp of here. We hear about demonstrations, but we really don't know whether there's a consensus among the demonstrators, and if so, what it's for. So can we just tick those off on the hostages? We hear about demonstrations about the hostages. Is there consensus on how much of a priority that still is?
So if I may, Nicole, bear with me just 1 minute about the general state of mind of the nation, and then I'll try to answer your question. I think it's very important to understand that what happened here, there was it's almost after being in an accident or getting wounded. There was an amazing adrenaline of resilience, of positive reaction to the trauma, which kept us really heroic, I think, in many ways. I mean, I'm talking about the people and the society, not about the politicians. And by the way, it goes to the army people, the soldiers, and so on. So for a few months, there was trauma, but there was amazing, impressive adrenaline all around. Now, to come to Israel, on the one hand, as I said, there is semi-normalcy, but there is profound sadness. People are sad. Okay, and I think it's because of the realization of what we are facing and the failure of the leadership. I go back to Churchill. There is no one to inspire and unite the people. There is no one to look up to. There's no father or mother to hug us. I talked to a real right-wing person a few hours ago, and he said, Ari, what's the main problem now? There's no empathy. Our politicians don't have empathy. So there isn't enough empathy to the Palestinians, but there isn't enough empathy to the Israelis. There isn't enough empathy to the 25-year-old soldier who came back from Gaza and lost his business. There isn't enough empathy to 70,000 people who are Israeli refugees right now. There is something, and again, I don't want to make it personal, that there's lack of, I won't blame anyone right now. There is lack of empathy, which becomes an acute problem. Now, regarding the different issues, hostages, basically Israelis are united. All Israelis, or like, except for the extreme right, Israelis are, first of all, it drives us crazy. We are the Israeli solidarity is amazing. So it's not just some horror film. We feel as if it's our own daughters and sons there. And the more stories come out about what they're experiencing and the rapes and the torture, people, people, they cannot sleep, they cannot breathe. It's horrible. There are no ways to describe it. So the nation is quite united around it, and I think that if there is a deal, people will be willing to pay a very high price. And by the way, the diplomats understand that this is the way to do something positive. The problem is that with its disintegration and going back to old politics that's happening in the last 2 months or a few weeks, especially the last 2 weeks, there are elements. First of all, some of the hostages' family are so desperate they are taking more extreme measures, and there is a split within the hostages' families because most of them want the fight for the hostage to be within unity, but some actually combine it with a fight against Netanyahu. So it becomes a mess. It becomes a mess. There's, again, it's people are so much in pain. That it endangers the way we see it. Ceasefire, Israelis, there is a consensus here, no going back to October 6th. So give us whatever solution that deals with the problem, but give us a solution that we would not feel that what happened October 7th may happen again. Generally, I think that the population is like split. About 40 to 40% are like whether they think the war is run well or not. Netanyahu's approval, 60% think that he doesn't run the war properly. People are, again, they are torn between some optimism and pessimism regarding the future of the war, and sadly, I think there is, the two things politically. Two things have happened. The support of Netanyahu collapsed. It didn't disappear, but it collapsed. It's about 2/3 of what it was, and on the other hand, there is a rise of nationalistic feelings, of fear, so all these that's the kind of the two strong powers that you feel within the Israeli. So like regarding what I mentioned, 65% are against the Palestinian state, and people were ambivalent about the humanitarian aid, to my great regret. So you need a leadership that will talk to the people and convince them that you can be strong while being just and moral and generous, and that you don't go into a kind of a rigid bunker mentality, because that's a great danger.
But that's incredibly important, though, certainly for me, I assume others to understand, because the Israelis support largely for the war effort, and hostility, or at least skepticism about the complaints from overseas, certainly gives a lot of support domestically for Israel to try to continue on the path that it's on, which is obviously a significant issue for all of us. Is there significant support for the war cabinet as distinct from Bibi? Is that seen as different?
And I don't remember now polls about the entire war cabinet, but I think the defense minister, Mr. Gallant, is rather popular, although he's responsible for what happened on October 7th. He's perceived as a tough guy. Benny Gantz is lost some support, but he's still the leading candidate for prime minister, and he's still perceived as the natural healer for Israel. And again, the radicalization of the last few weeks endangers Gantz in a sense, and it endangers the capability. Look, what my own, I'll say something personal about my own views. I think what I believed in a few months ago is that we should have had a full unity government, not Gantz and Eisenkot leaving, but we should have had Lapid and Labor and all the others joining. So Ben-Gvir and Smotrich are marginalized and probably leave the government. And then we would have had a Netanyahu, Gantz, Lapid, Labor government, which would have been much more reasonable in the short term. And then elections that we arrived not totally split, so there isn't kind of civil war. And then a new kind of government without Netanyahu after the election. That was my dream scenario a few months ago. That didn't happen. And now I would say the danger of internal strife while there is an outside conflict is growing by the day. The demonstrations are becoming more angry. The Netanyahu did not take any, I'm not talking about resigning. He didn't take any responsibility. He drives people crazy. So you have Netanyahu is going back to pre-October 7th politics, and gradually the people on the other side are drawn there. And my belief, and I'm still hopeful, again, I'm an optimist, that we should bring new kind of politics. I mean, this is such a critical juncture. And I think the way is to really bring all this strength in Israeli society. The yearning for unity is amazing, is deep. People want strength and unity. That's what they want now, because they are afraid. But right now, the political dynamics doesn't reflect it. The political dynamics right now goes the other way.
Right. So it will come as no surprise to you that there are people here who believe that the attack in Damascus was an effort to get to stir up or to give Bibi an incentive after retaliation to go after Iran, to go after Iran's nuclear facilities, that way he could unite the country and keep himself in power. So that conversation obviously shows some skepticism about Bibi's motives, no doubt. But also, is there any realistic way of moving him out in the next couple of years, on the one hand, before the elections? Do those protests have any impact? Is a possibility of a general strike anywhere on the horizon? Or given what you've just said, is there really much more support generally right now for the kinds of things he's saying and doing, even before we get to the domestic issues, which I want to get to? Can you move him out? Is Iran, is he going to be able to unite the country if Iran comes after you?
So I'll give you my dream and then my analysis. What we need is Martin Luther King kind of protest. We need 1 million people surrounding the Knesset singing Hatikva quietly. That will bring the walls down. Sadly, the dynamic, and by the way, and then the next step, we need an FDR government. We need a New Deal. By the way, we need an FDR in 2 dimensions. We need a kind of New Deal for Israel, a totally new republic. And we have to, what Roosevelt did in the 40s, we need the military buildup because we are faced with a lot of danger, but in the right kind of way. So that's a challenge. That's what we need. So right now, it's not happening because the anger and on both sides it's so huge. I have reason. Look, first of all, without getting into details, the work I'm doing, I'm trying to bring about the 2 things I talked about. I think there is a chance, I cannot share with you too much, that within a month we'll have an attempt to have a new kind of protest movement that will be powerful but quiet, powerful and patriotic, not that angry and not that personal. If you won't share, I'll say no. My slogan right now, I think we have to restart Israel. The slogan has to be, let's rather the blame game, let's restart Israel. And then, obviously, Netanyahu will not be part of that. But the moment we just focus on him, we actually strengthen him, and we strengthen the old politics. So we need a new kind of protest movement that will bring profound change. And then the next government is the most important government in Israel's history since Ben-Gurion's first government in 1948. We really have, the challenge is so enormous, and we don't have time to describe it now. It's so enormous that we'll really have to, to rebuild our republic in a way. And again, my hope, one, as I said, the amazing human capital, talent in Israeli society, and the understanding. Part of the problem of Israeli politics is that the good people turn their back on politics. We really thought we can do our businesses, we can do high tech, we can do our startups, and forget about the state. Everybody understands how this doesn't work. So the mission number one for the new government will be to bring 5,000, 10,000 amazing people from the private sector to the public sector and to politics to change the face of the Knesset, to change the face of government, and bring all this Israeli genius that is all over the place, all over the place. We have genius everywhere except for government. And we have to change that. We have to bring that extraordinary Israeli talent into politics and into government.
So let me ask you this then. There's a lot of talk that we read about the Haredi being in the military service, the big legislative battles about the Haredi going forward. And I have the feeling that's much more consequential in Israel than many of us might actually understand. Very briefly, where did that come out? Where has that come out? And what impact does that have either on Bibi's ability to keep his coalition and keep in power, or in any other way affecting the kinds of things that we're talking about? Or is it?
So thank you. It's such an important question. So first of all, to connect with what we just said, in the real world, I think the Haredi issue, what keeps Bibi awake at night politically, is probably the Haredi issue, because the Netanyahu coalition is based on a coalition between the Likud voters, who are mostly actually moderate, mostly Sephardic, lower middle class Jews, who are not extreme in any sort of way, the ultra-nationalists and the ultra-Orthodox. In the past, he had the Russians, but they went with Lieberman, so he lost them already, or he lost many of them. So these are the three. The Haredi issue creates a real wedge between the ultra-nationalists and the ultra-Orthodox, and definitely with the Likud voters. Because what we experience now, there are two issues. One, we understand that we need a much larger army, much larger. And we actually need them. We cannot have the Haredi, their population is very young, so they're only 10% of the general population, or 11%, but I believe there are about 25, 27% of the cohorts of 18-year-olds and 20-year-olds. So we just cannot win the wars of 2030 and 2040 without them joining. But the second element is as important. When you ask the PhD guy from the Hebrew, and the owner, the lady who owns a small business in startup business, it's a high-tech business in Herzliya, to give up everything, endanger their life, go back to the army, and there is no sense of equality and solidarity, they won't do it. They won't do it. It has to do with adrenaline, I said. They did it once. Perhaps they'll do it another time. They won't do it a third time. So the Haredi issue becomes crucial, and Bibi has no solutions. So this can very well break up his coalition. So right now, again, being the political manipulator he is, he managed to massage it for a moment, but the Knesset will be back in 5-6 weeks, and it'll be a major issue, because I would say there is a huge 70-80% of Jewish Israelis who won't take it anymore, And by the way, I think we need creative solutions. I don't think we can draft all the Haredi. That's for another discussions. But now, if I may, I'll connect it with something we did not touch upon. I think there is a huge potential here for the alliance between American Jews and Israeli Jews. Because I said it in the past, and I believe in it very much. We need a non-Orthodox alliance. I'm not against Orthodox people and not even against ultra-Orthodox. But non-Orthodox Jews will not survive as Jews if there isn't a democratic Jewish state that is a powerhouse for a non-Orthodox Jewish identity. It's crucial for the future of the American Jewish community. The ultra-Orthodox communities will survive in New York State and in Manchester and in Antwerp, even if there is no Israel. But the reform movement and the conservative movement need Israel, but they need an Israel they can identify with. Your children and your grandchildren need an Israel they can be proud of, not an Israel that is an embarrassment. So the need, it's now, and now with anti-Semitism, when we realize that what happens here affects you personally, not metaphorically, it's our lives are on the line. Our lives here and your lives there. And it's time to us to wake up, because the bad guys, the extremists, are working in such a sophisticated way to impose their crazy ideas. They nearly destroyed Israel with this Kohelet of theirs because they were so effective. They're the craziest ideas, not relevant to anything, and they destroyed Israel. So it's time for all of us to work together in such effective way, not just, it's serious, it's business. And the business it's about our lives. So I think that, again, without being I'm not into, I don't want I don't hate Haredis, but I'm not willing to let them destroy the Jewish democratic state that is essential for my boys and daughter and essential for your children and grandchildren. Sorry for the emotions there.
No, it's very fair. And I wanted to get to it because I gather it is hugely significant there, but also since everybody is looking for a path to move on from Bibi, it is interesting that might actually be a quite legitimate way to move on from him to something that is more akin to what you've had in mind. You've talked a lot about world Jewry. Just, do you have any other message to people who are on here, who think about it, the role that we can play, our messaging to Biden, if that's significant? I know there was some anger at Biden for what he did this week. There was some level of understanding. Do you have a message to us on what we can do to help sort of survive and navigate through this path? Or is it really just to stay interested in
I'll do it. So again, I'm trying not to repeat the mistakes of my government, and I don't have the chutzpah to tell you or to suggest to you what to do as American citizens. That's for you. You decide on what. But I want to, those of us on the conversations who are either Jewish or care about Israel so much. I think it's time to continue to what I said. It's time to think strategically and act strategically. There is so much that is the goodwill and good work that goes for all kinds of things at a time when we face existential danger. It's an existential moment. It's the worst moment since the Holocaust. And we did amazing things after the Holocaust because we realized what the danger was and we rose to the challenge. So I'll relate to something very sensitive in America, but I hope I can say it in a safe way. I will not get into supporting or criticizing what Chuck Schumer said as an American senator. I think that people who are Jewish or care about Israel should say things like that as Jews, not as American politicians. we should have a much more honest conversation within the Jewish people, much more honest. And I think it's absolutely legitimate for the American Jewish community to raise its voice as a Jewish, not as American citizens, but as Jews, and to say, our community is in danger now. We suffer. Our kids in college are intimidated. And we are proud. We are proud of Israel. We are proud of Jews. And we'll fight the anti-Semites. But we need to do it together. We cannot, Israel has to be an ally and not a burden. And I think it's time for the Jews of the world to have a stake in the Jewish state. Not to be polite anymore. Not to stay away, and because what we do affects you, and what you do or not do affects us. So the alliance has to become much more intimate, much more strategic, and if I dare say, more courageous, because the extremists are working together to destroy the Israel we love, and they are pretty close. So we have to rise and fight back together.
Sorry, thank you for that. On the last point, it's something that we should continue to discuss as we have our Ari Zooms, because being courageous and knowing exactly what to do about it are, I think, not necessarily obvious. So we should continue to make sure we address that as we talk. I thank you. I could ask you questions forever, but I will stop and let others chime in. So
first of all, Ari, let me thank you and Nicole. This was really amazing. I mean, both of you, really. The questions, the answers, the pace, it was really terrific. Several commenters commented on that. I know I speak for everyone on that. Second, personally, if I can say, the points you made in the last few minutes in particular, I think are so critical, so historically important. I'm not sure either side fully understands the importance of that. And the American Jewish community and its understanding of Israel in terms of the future of Jewish people globally is something poorly understood. And the paradox of the point you made before, which was we need an Israel that American Jews can be proud of. We also need an Israel that survives for American Jews, not just to be proud of, but to be part of. And there in that is a whole lot of stuff. So forgive me for my emotion, but what you said, I think, is so critically important. Now, first question. Just got back from Egypt, and she wants to know, she thinks that Israel's put Sisi in a very difficult spot. And she wants to know, can that change? Can Sisi be brought more into what we view as the constructive Arab response?
So again, so who can be brought in?
Sisi in Egypt.
Oh, yeah. Yes, absolutely. Look, as you can, as you've heard, I'm a great fan of the moderate Arabs. And again, with no illusions, there are several layers there, but that's, look, the most amazing thing, positive thing that happened, not only the peace agreements and then the Abraham Accords, but look, the fact that the peace agreement with Egypt survived the rule of the Islamic Brotherhood was amazing. The fact that even now it's still working, it's quite amazing, and Egypt is crucial. I would say we will need Gulf money to fund Egyptian and Jordanian activity that will help the Palestinians move forward in a reasonable, pragmatic way while guaranteeing Israel's security. That's generally the formula. So first of all, mission number one, by the way, is really to save Jordan. I'm telling you, Jordan is in danger, and everything must be done to save Jordan. Because if, God forbid, and I've been a Hashemite admirer, and never mind that there is a certain lady there who says now things that annoy us, but the family has done an amazing job over the last decade, and we should keep them. Sisi is the same. Sisi, as you know, I assume most of you know, he has huge economic problems and huge debt. we have to try to use that as leverage and to offer him economical relief and support so he plays a much more dominant, constructive role in the Gaza solution. What shape it will take, whether you want Egyptian army nearby blocking the Gaza, there are many ideas. I don't want to get into specifics unless you'll ask. But we will need, again, my hope for Gaza is that it'll be a kind of MBZ-inspired entity. I would like to see it as a Gaza Dubai 2050. I said it before, I would bring Mr. Dakhlan as the moderate Palestinian under MBZ. I will ask the Saudis to fund it, and the Egyptians to give the security and umbrella and envelope. So I totally agree. I think that Assisi is, within the context, is a very important player. We want to support Egypt. We want Egypt to do more, and this is where, when I talk about this American Arab-Israeli alliance, American-Israeli-Arab alliance, that's the role. I would love to see kind of a new Kissinger, doing kind of architecture in the region. I think that while the dangers are so clear, the opportunities are huge. Look, there are distinguished businessmen in this conversation. I won't. The potential, the economic potential of growth of the moderate Arab world is enormous. If there won't be an implosion here, there is future. So let's connect their future. Let's connect this Arab modernity. And again, the Sisi, it's the modernity of the Gulf, this kind of role that Egypt and Jordan have with Palestinian moderates. That's where hope lies.
All right, you and Nicole talked a fair amount about Bibi's future. We got a lot of questions on that as well. So let me try and see if I can pin you down. And if you don't want to be pinned down, you won't be. 6 months from now, will Bibi Netanyahu be prime minister?
First, it's really stupid to answer that question. I mean, the question is smart, but the answer is stupid. I think that he has 6 months. He has pretty good chance. I don't know if it's 50-50. I find it difficult to believe that he will be prime minister next summer, or in the summer of 2015. I think. Look, I'll say the following: I don't think Netanyahu has a political future, and there are two reasons for that. One, no Israeli prime minister survived war. Golda Meir did not survive the '73 war. Menachem Begin did not survive the first Lebanon war. Ehud Barak didn't survive the second Intifada. Ehud Olmert didn't survive the second Lebanon war. I find it impossible to believe that the worst war ever, handled very badly, the prime minister, even if he's personally a saint. I know that actually Netanyahu is probably a saint, but just because of his responsibility, I don't see that. That's number one. That's the physics of Israeli politics say that he cannot survive. The second element is the polls. You see that the vast majority of Israelis want him gone, and the Bibi formula, successful, was based on the fact that people did not get killed, people did have a job, and they had it like a reasonably good life. They could buy a nice small car, go on a vacation, and he basically said, "You never had it so good." That's gone. So I don't see any. I don't think there is. And here I'm taking the risk. No way Bibi will win the next elections. The Via Dolorosa is, when do we get there? How do we get there? And how much blood and suffering we'll have until we get there? I would say in a sentence, and again, I think Netanyahu has to go, but I want it done peacefully. I think that one of the things, we don't want a civil war. So I like, just when I talked about the Martin Luther King demonstrations, I want a lot of power for a lot of pressure for change, but in a kind of quiet, determined pressure. I don't want it to get violent and to get into a civil war, which will be disastrous.
Ari, I'm going to jump back into two questions. One is, because you said he would not win an election. If the election were tomorrow, would he win? Given the war?
No way. Again, I'm doing something very stupid, very stupid, but because I'm among friends, I'll do it. No way Netanyahu can win in elections. His only way, what his politics is to buy time. And
that's my next question. Okay, so there are a lot of people who think that he's buying time until Trump might win. Let's say that's true. What does he think Trump will get him?
First of all, I assume, again, in the past, I used to talk to Netanyahu. He's not been speaking to me for some years. The last conversation we had was about his autobiography, which was a year and a half ago. But I think I know the guy very well. I think I know him well. So I think you are right that he's tempted to think, no, let's buy time and then the next friendly president comes along. But the wise Netanyahu of the past knew that there is no rosy scenario there because there will be two implications. And again, I don't want to get into American politics, but from an Israeli point of view, if Israel will be held responsible for a Trump victory, even if it's not right, the damage we'll have with Democrats will be catastrophic. And I don't know, and again, I don't know that the alternative for Israel will be, for Netanyahu himself, will be something that he would like. So I think that getting into that game is dangerous. We were so smart. When we avoided getting into that, we should rebuild bipartisan support. We should not, work against this president, for that president, not wait for a president. We have to respect what the American people have chosen and to work with whatever American president is there.
The destruction of Hamas seems to be a fundamental Israeli tenet. What does that mean? Is it realistic? How does it play itself out, Ari?
So it's, I think we understand that we already didn't destroy, but we destroyed much of the Hamas army. But basically, again, talking of Israeli achievements, we probably killed about 8,000, the numbers are not clear, but more reliable, about 8,000 Hamas terrorists. We destroyed about 18 Hamas regiments of 24. So we dismantled a lot of their military apparatus. The problem is that does not prevent them from being a guerrilla organization. And that will keep the trouble going on. And that's the flaw in the strategic thinking. So the fact, on the one hand, it was essential to do what we did, but that does not solve the problem. And at the end of the day, it has to do with what we discussed. The only way to really defeat Hamas is to bring a political alternative. Because right now, if you'll just have millions of people suffering, hundreds of thousands of youngsters angry, weapons, desperation, and hate. So don't call it Hamas, call it whatever you call it. You'll have the problem there. The only way, I'll say it in a sentence. If you do Dresden, you need an Adenauer. And if you don't have an Adenauer, you'll just have rubble. So again, there is no Palestinian Adenauer, but we have to do the best we can within the circumstances to put some sort of structure. And again, there are enough powerful forces who want that. So ironically, the way to defeat Hamas is to do politics and to do something resembling a peace process of some sort, a new kind, not the old one, not the old one. But if you just fight this war militarily, you are bound to lose. The war must have a political dimension and a consistent strategy.
Feeding off of that, he says he thinks Bibi's, you're talking about how to solve this issue. He thinks Bibi's strategy is not to have a solution, but to run out the clock. Is that a fair conclusion?
Look, please bear with me. I'm trying not to make, look, I wrote an article 4 years ago saying Israel was hit by a horrible disease called Bibisis. All we talked about was Bibi. We either admired him or hated him. Okay, it was, and therefore we didn't deal with our health system, with our education system, and with our security. So you can imagine what my feelings and thoughts are, but I don't want to make it just a personal issue. I think that if Bibi had decency in him, just because of that, he would have resigned 5 years ago. You cannot have an entire nation obsessed with one person for 30 years. Doesn't fly, even if he's a saint and a genius. So the problem we had at a certain point, although we are such a lively democracy, rather than have Republican policy, the Republican not in the American party sense, but maintaining an Israeli republic, we moved to monarchistic politics of about one monarch. Die, as we say, enough. Haven't we learned the lesson? So I think we must have move forward, have a new page, but let's not keep it. It's part of the malaise. I mean, when we are just obsessed with him, it keeps him in power. It keeps the opposition. It keeps the split. It doesn't allow us to move forward. I'll give you one Middle East example. I was given by an Arab historian once. He said there are two kinds of revolutions in the Arab world. Iraqi revolutions, you kill the dictator, you kill his son. It's very bloody, very Shakespearean. In Egypt, when they had a revolution with the king, they put the king on his yacht. They sent him to Monaco, and they move forward. We need to move forward, but we need to do it in a way that doesn't destroy the nation, that doesn't tear us apart.
So let me put my own point on it. So as important as what you're saying is, these issues are much more important. The Israeli issues, the Jewish issues, global Judaism are much more important than simply Bibi Netanyahu. And so narrowing the focus is the wrong way to view the problem. We've got to open the aperture so that people see that it's not just the election of 2024. It's not just Bibi Netanyahu and his succession in government. There's a lot more at stake right now.
As you know, and some people know, the work I'm doing is to build the agenda for the new renewed Israeli Republic. This is what we have to do. There is so much work to be done. So obviously, I'm not politically naive. Obviously, the personal element is there and the political element is there, but let's put it. I think that the moment, the slogan for Israel now is let's begin again. And with the great Israeli spirit, like the pioneer spirit, the people in the Negev spirit, the 48 spirit, the 70s, the high tech. Let's come on. We sunk into a pit. We sunk into a terrible, terrible dark pit. Let's climb out of it, bring light in, and move forward. Together with look. 70% of Israelis agree on 70% of the issues. Let's work with that and move forward.
Again, much as I wish we had less need to hear from you these days, we have more need to hear from you. We will continue these Zooms. The amount of positive feedback and the incredible job that you and Nicole did today. I just want to thank both of you. And thank you not just for the Zooms, but for the work that you and the Israeli Third Way are doing, because this is, as you say, a pivotal time in Israel's history and in world Jewry's history. and frankly, in world history. And so keep at it, my friend, and thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you very much. Be well.